In 2016, Warner Bros. Released Suicide Squad, the third film in the DC Extended Universe. Unfortunately, the film released to mediocre reviews, but despite this, the film still grossed over $700 million worldwide, thanks to the film's star power and unique visual aesthetic. From the original member of the Suicide Squad to Joker's early looks, let's take a look at the many concepts and plot elements that were cut from Suicide Squad 2016.
I am not someone who is loved. I'm an idea.
When David Ayer was formulating his version of the Joker, he took inspiration from the very first iteration of the character, the one from the Golden Age, who's very different to the versions we have now. David Ayer loved the idea of this Joker being an insane gangster and decided that this approach was the best way to differentiate his version from all the other iterations. David Ayer began brainstorming what a contemporary version of a gangster Joker would look like, and eventually he would land on this design for the character: a man with tattoos all over his body, extravagant and expensive clothes, shiny jewelry, and luxurious cars. Despite Joker's unique appearance, his early designs looked a bit different. When you look at some of the early iterations of his look, you'll notice one glaring detail. Joker is devoid of tattoos in a majority of the art. He actually looks a lot closer to his comic iteration. This may imply that the decision to include tattoos was something that was not considered until much later in the design process. Joker may have been devoid of tattoos, but the creative team still tried to add unique design elements to this iteration. For one thing, you'll notice that Joker has a noticeable scar around his mouth, as if he grabbed a knife and cut the corners of his mouth. The decision to make Joker an incredibly scarred gangster may have been a popular one early on, as there exists this concept art for the character, and as you can see, his face is entirely disfigured, with lacerations, cuts, and bruises all over his face, and a Glasgow smile on his mouth, and one blind eye. David Ayer wanted this Joker to show signs of his past injuries and encounters with Batman. This is accomplished through the tattoos and grills in the final film. However, in the early concept art, this would have been accomplished through scars. Some Joker concept art makes the character appear incredibly muscular and imposing, but a majority of the art sticks within the more traditional body type for the character. Eventually, the tattoos for the Joker would be brought in, but at this point, the character would begin to appear much closer to his final design. This Joker concept was one of the many that explored the tattoo look, and it looks very different from the final design. The tattoos on the body, for example, seem to consist of many stars that reach up towards his body. In terms of appearance, he seems to be just as stylish as the final design, but there's still some differences. For one thing, there's a massive increase of tattoos on his arms and neck. He now sports an undercut hairstyle and has a star tattoo near his right eye, and most notably, seems to have a Glasgow smile across his face. This is one of the better early designs for the Joker. However, some concepts were a bit more inventive with their approach. This look for the Joker is relatively tame and has many unique design elements. The Joker in this piece of artwork appears to be completely bald, with a small patch of hair at the top of his head. He also appears to have a scar with the words Harley on his chest. Another interesting addition is his skin, as it appears to be some kind of paint instead of being a natural skin color. This design for the Joker is really interesting, and I think certain elements of the look would have worked in the final design. Eventually, the creative team would land on this tattoo design for the Joker. Unlike the final film, this iteration of the tattoos are mostly isolated to his abdomen, and just like the final version, each tattoo tells a story about who he is. These tattoos for the Joker must have been the most popular, at least for a while, as it's present in 3 different pieces of concept art. However, eventually, for unknown reasons, these tattoos for the Joker would be altered into the final version we see in the film.
Something tells me a whole lot of people are about to die.
Harley Quinn is one of the most famous DC villains in comic history and one of the most iconic elements of her character, early on at least, was her jester outfit, which she primarily wore for several years. However, since Suicide Squad was a much more serious story, the creative team for Suicide Squad was very keen on reinventing how Harley Quinn looked through grounding her in reality and thematically tying her design to her relationship with the Joker. This early 2000s hot topic-like design for Harley Quinn is the most influential depiction of her appearance, as it inspired the character's look for years to come. In order to formulate the design for Harley Quinn, the creative team and costume designer Kate Hawley took inspiration from many real-life influences like Mexican drug lords and female rock and roll legends like Debbie Harry and Courtney Love. This can easily be seen in a majority of the early concept art. Harley Quinn here definitely looks like someone who's obsessed with heavy metal, especially when you see her attire and her messy makeup, which helps her look even more chaotic. You'll notice that a lot of art seems to show off Harley Quinn's body. The reason for this is explained by the costume designer Katie Hawley, who states that Harley feels a sense of power from her sex appeal. She does not dress this way to impress Joker, but because she simply wants to on her own volition. With the overall design approach for Harley Quinn set in stone, there were a few more iterations of her look until we landed on the one in the film. Every other member of the Suicide Squad also have many variations in their designs, but overall, in comparison to their final looks, these alternate designs don't stray significantly from their final appearance, the only exception being Killer Croc, whose early designs had him look a lot more monstrous with an apparent exaggeration in facial features, which invokes the imagery of a lizard. Katana also went through some design alterations. Some are very unique looking and take massive creative liberties to formulate a new look for the character, but many of them are very similar to the final design, with only a few slight differences, like the skin color, which is gray, which some depictions of the character have. In these two concepts, Joker appears to be sitting within the Batmobile, waiting for Batman to appear. This scene likely took place after Batman saved Harley Quinn from drowning. It's not known what exactly is happening in this scene. However, it's safe to assume that Joker somehow escapes, probably through some cheap tactic. This scene was likely removed because it makes no sense to have a Joker and Batman interaction in a Suicide Squad film. Early during the development of Suicide Squad, when David Ayer was still trying to figure out what villains would make up the roster of the team, many characters would be considered, but would unfortunately never make the cut. King Shark is one of these characters, and judging from the art, he was heavily modeled after a hammerhead. The reason he was not used was due to practicality, as the creative team thought that it was too difficult to have a full CG character in the film, and Killer Croc would then serve as his replacement. Scarecrow was another villain who was ultimately cut from the film. His role in the story is unknown, but when you take a look at the concept art, he very much fits in with how the character appears in the comics. Enchantress has a very distinct look in the comics, which makes her very recognizable. However, Enchantress appears a bit more dirty and disheveled in the film. The reason for this appearance is that the creative team wanted to ground her appearance in reality by taking inspiration from how witches would look like in a contemporary world. A dirty and unkempt person with a body filled with tattoos and hexes. Despite this unique approach to her design, initially the creative team were aiming for something different, and if you look at the early concept art, you can see that they tried to stay faithful to how she appeared in the comics. Some did take some creative liberties, but they still embraced something colorful, mystical, and otherworldly. No matter how the creative team approached the design, they always managed to create something eye-catching and inspire a sense of awe from the viewer. It's sad that many of these concepts could not make it into the final film, but it's always nice to look back at the unused ideas and see the many directions this film could have went.